When we physicists look in outer space for alien life, we don't look for little green men. We look for type 1, type 2, and type 3 civilizations. A type 1 civilization has harnessed planetary power. They control earthquakes, the weather, volcanoes. They have cities on the ocean. Anything planetary, they control. That's type 1. A type 2 civilization is stellar. They've exhausted the power of a planet, and they get their energy directly from their mother star. They just don't get a suntan on a weekend. They use solar flares. They use the power of the sun itself to energize their huge machines. Eventually, they exhaust the power of a star, and they go galactic. They harness the power of billions of stars within a galaxy. Now, for example, Buck Rogers would correspond to a type 1 civilization, a planetary civilization. Star Trek and the Federation of Planets, who have colonized a few star systems, will correspond to a type 2 system. And the Empire of Star Wars would correspond to a type 3 civilization. Now, what are we on this scale? We are type 0. We don't even rate on this scale. We get our energy from, not from stars or galaxies, we get our energy from dead plants, oil and coal. But we can calculate when we will attain type 1 status, in about 100 years. Now, every time I read the newspaper, I see evidence of this historic transition from type 0 to type 1. And I am privileged to be alive in the most important era in the history of the human race, the transition from type 0 to type 1. I read the newspaper, and I see evidence of this everywhere. What is the European Union? The European Union has been formed to oppose NAFTA, that is, the United States, Canada, and Mexico. But why? Because we're seeing the beginnings of a type 1 economy. Huge planetary trading blocks are the beginnings of a type 1 economy. And what language will this type 1 economy speak? Everywhere I go around the world, I find that the elites all speak English as a second language. In the future, the planet Earth will be like that. Everyone will speak their own native language, but on top of that, there will be a type 1 language, probably English. There's also going to be a type 1 culture and a type 1 political system as well. You can go anywhere on the planet Earth and show people pictures of two individuals that are instantly recognizable by any human, Madonna and Arnold Schwarzenegger. In other words, we're talking about Hollywood movies. We're talking about rock and roll, rap music, blue jeans. That's going to be the planetary culture of the planet Earth. And what is the internet? The internet is the beginning of a type 1 telephone system. That's all it is. And so this transition is perhaps the most important transition of all time. Some people don't want it. They fear this transition because this transition is to a planetary civilization tolerant of many cultures. These are the terrorists. In their gut, they fear this because they know they are witnessing the birth pangs of a beginning of a new planetary civilization, and the terrorists want nothing to do with it.
Hello everyone, welcome back to GGN. This is part 2 for this news report today. It's Monday, February 4th, 2013, and I'm Darko. Alright, so he's talking about the terrorists, right? Didn't have to go that long, but just to give you an idea of what the heck he was actually talking about, I decided to just roll the 3-minute clip there. That's, I mean, I've mentioned that before, that clip with Kaku, and it ties in with this article that we already covered, which is Captain Kirk's predecessor, Captain Pike, Star Trek, was RAND Corporation Predictive Programming. In a rare and recently unearthed interview from '65, the actor who preceded William Shatner as the first captain of the Enterprise stated that the series was based on the RAND Corporation's projection of things to come. And of course, they killed his character out. But we'll keep hearing the word terrorist. I think it's a bigger word and more broad range than I think people know about, right? It's not just extremists from, Muslim extremists or Christian extremists or anti-government. This is a planetary shift, an off-planet shift and movement here. And if you can see it, you're a little bit ahead of other people because that's where it's going. There is some truth to science fiction, but there's also a lot of propaganda and stuff like that, like we're just programming. We have CTC says opposition to a New World Order is terrorist activity from February 2nd. According to a report from the Combating Terrorism Center at West Point, anti-federalists who oppose the New World Order, as well as members of several other far-right-wing activist groups, are potential terrorist threats. West Point is the U.S. military academy that trains, educates, and prepares cadets for their service in the U.S. Army. The CTC, Combating Terrorism Center, was established following the events of September 11, 2001. A new report from the CTC, however, suggests that far-right-wing political activists, not radical Islamic groups, are the new terrorist threat in America, and even goes so far as to say that those who oppose a New World Order are potentially violent terrorists. On February 2nd, 2013, Hillary Clinton, International Order, New World Order, says editor's notes, no question this is right in your face, off-the-cuff speech, but it says you, the citizen, the debt slave, do not matter because the pillars of major powers that they're talking about in the speech are dominated by a handful of big institutions and alliances, a blueprint of policies for an international order. So here's the actual source. It's a real article and stuff like that, or presentation, transcript, and it goes in there and talks about we face many difficult challenges. Things have changed in the last 4 years under Obama's leadership. It's really not his leadership, it's the CFR, Rand Corporation, Rothschilds, all of these different factions, families, bloodlines, and interests. We've ended the war in Iraq. We've begun a transition in Afghanistan and brought Osama bin Laden to justice. So, you know, good old-fashioned propaganda. But it goes on here and it says that, so the question we ask ourselves every day is, what does this mean for America? And then we go on to say, how can we advance our own interests? Of course, that's not the people's interests. And also uphold a just, rules-based international order, a system that does provide clear rules of the road for everything from intellectual property rights to freedom of navigation to fair labor standards. It goes on here and it says that the pillars were a handful of big institutions and alliances dominated by major powers, and that structure delivered unprecedented peace and prosperity. But time takes its toll even on the greatest edifice. These are too big to fail and all that military-industrial complex, and we do need a new architecture for this new world. More Frank Gehry than formal Greek. Laughter. Think of it. Yeah, so just remember this article. CTC says opposition to a New World Order is terrorist activity. States considering laws that would make an act of terrorism to report on abuses at factory farms. This is from January 24th, 2013. It says that 3 states are the latest states to introduce these agricultural gag laws, and lawmakers in 10 other states introduced similar bills in 2011-2012. Article was originally published in partnership with globalpossibilities.org. So you can go there and check that out. It says, by making an act of terrorism for anyone who investigates animal cruelty, food safety, environmental violations on the corporate-controlled farms that produce the bulk of our meat, eggs, and dairy products. It's called the Animal and Ecological Terrorism Act, and it's designed to protect big agri and big energy. I remember this article from December 2012. Fracking industry hires psychological warfare military officers to combat peaceful opposition. It says years after Range Resources, a leading hydraulic fracturing company, claimed it had hired former military officers with experience in psychological warfare to combat anti-fracking activists, it seems as though they are losing ground in the battle to win hearts and minds of Americans and are turning to politicians instead. Talking about activists, it says it was kind of shocking. It says here, a small city standing up against corporations' information war. But the key here is calling the activists insurgents, or basically terrorists. So it says download the U.S. Army Marine Corps Counterinsurgency Manual because we are dealing with an insurgency, he said. And this is this individual who is consulting, or basically consulting these fracking firms. There's a lot of good lessons in there, and coming from a military background, I found that insight in that extremely remarkable. Dead children spied for UK police for decades, says a report. It says for over 4 decades, British police have been stealing the identities of dead children, using them as aliases for their undercover operations, some of which lasted for as long as 10 years. It says the probe alleges the Metropolitan Police secretly authorized such activities back in the 1960s to infiltrate protest groups. They did so without informing parents of the dead children. That's kind of like when they draw blood, right? And you go to the hospital and give birth. Put a nice database. And something not really worth celebrating, but it's worth acknowledging. You're not going to see this in all the newspapers, celebration, because they know exactly what it means as far as putting people, the kind of the final takeover back in 1913 of the United States, basically. 100 years of U.S. federal income tax. On February 3rd, 1913, one of the two most historic events in U.S. history took place, the ratification of the 16th Amendment, which established Congress's right to impose a federal income tax on Americans, and overturned Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution, which prohibited a general income tax. The amendment was brief and to the point and read as follows. The Congress shall have powers to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. As for the other historic event of the U.S. history, ironically, it too took place in 1913 on December 23rd. This was the day when the Federal Reserve was founded. The chart below summarizes what has happened since. You can go in there and check it out. Obama says there is no doubt we need more taxes. On Sunday, he insisted that the nation needs additional tax revenue, some of which the government could acquire by closing or reducing loopholes and deductions. Quote, there is no doubt we need additional revenue, coupled with smart spending reductions in order to bring down our deficit, the president said in an interview on CBS, and we can do it in a gradual way so that it doesn't have a huge impact. That's, basically incremental, right? So people don't, they don't catch on. They don't, the boiling frog theory. Do it slowly. New film, Secret Wars, tells a story about the president's paramilitary assassins group. The film Secret Wars, which premiered at Sundance, can be viewed, as Amy Goodman sees it, as an important narrative of excesses in the global war on terror. It also is a record of something scary for those of us at home and uncovers the biggest story. Says the film tracks the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, a network of highly trained, completely unaccountable U.S. assassins armed with ever-expanding kill list. It was JSOC that ran the operations behind the bin Laden raid. So it goes on here, says it operates outside the traditional chain of command and reports directly to the President of the U.S. It says, in the words of Wired magazine, JSOC operates with practically no accountability. It says here the maker of the film calls JSOC the President's Paramilitary. Its budget, which may be in the billions, is secret. They have hacker-in-chief Obama given right to launch preemptive cyberattacks. A secret review has concluded that U.S. President Obama has the authority to launch a preemptive cyber attack on any country on the basis that they are considered a cyber threat, even if there is no concrete evidence of this threat. And something most of you have probably already seen or heard about, this Chris Kyle, Navy SEAL, one of his last interviews. The former Navy SEAL and best-selling author of American Sniper, Chris Kyle, and his friend died yesterday in Erath County, Texas. Guns.com had a chance to meet and interview Kyle just 2 weeks ago at the show 2013, SHOT Show 2013. So, pretty strange stuff going on. Of course, he was going to help a individual that supposedly had PTSD. He, freaked out, and so this is not good for vets. I think the whole story with Alabama too, that's ended after 7 days, which is exactly what the police knew they had to do, which was to wait 7 days, and eventually this guy would come out, because a neighbor said they eventually would come out after 7 days, and he did. And I guess that he's dead now. But one of the things, of course, is that he was a veteran, and he was an anti-federalist is really what he was, but they'll call him an anti-government conspiracy theorist. So they're really, prepper, really, and that's what they're really hitting home at. The terrorists, remember? The terrorists, that's what Kaku called them. He was a Navy SEAL, that individual, and remember the 1,100 Green Berets that signed a petition against gun control, retired Army Special Forces Master Sergeant Jeff Hinton. So, was looking for 100 current or retired Green Berets to sign a petition defending the Second Amendment rights. What he received was 1,100 Special Forces operators, all of whom are against bans on the kind of military-style rifles targeted in the wake of the Sandy Hook school shooting in December. So there you go. And Paraguay's opposition presidential hopeful dies in a plane crash. So very, very convenient. That happens a lot. So they blamed it on bad weather, and the helicopter was disintegrated. The questions, of course, the mainstream media is covering. Did Beyonce flash an Illuminati sign? Well, she's showing the Egyptian pyramid. There's always this theme of pyramids in Egypt and pharaohs and stuff around this. So they're saying that she was just showing some love to her husband Jay-Z, which also uses the diamond as its symbol. Oh, okay, so it's a diamond, not a pyramid. The funniest tweets of the great Super Bowl blackout which was the Illuminati. We have nothing to do with this. And this happens a lot, these blackouts, I notice. I don't watch football anymore, but I hear about it. NFL, we had a backup generator the whole time. So, thank you.